Oh, are we all?
Yep, we're up.
Is it just us three today? 4, 5?
Well, we have a couple.
Oh, they got in line.
Lance and Mitch are all.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
Go ahead, call the
Roll
roll.
call roll. Lance.
Present.
Right.
Mark, present via Zoom.
Chris.
We're gonna have to talk about this Zoom thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, Jessica's absent. Mitch.
Present via Zoom.
Okay. You're good. Bob Hyde.
Present via Zoom.
All right, Mark Perry.
Here.
Steve Reed.
Here.
And I'm here. The quorum.
As is the chief.
Present.
Yep, sorry.
All right, you, chief, you said you have one addition to the agenda?
Potential. I've got Assistant Chief Armstrong. He's working on a community risk assessment. And if he is available today, he might be able to stop in and show us some data.
Good.
Just based off of last 5 years worth of incident reporting, trend lines and things like that.
So we can-
If not, potentially next month.
Okay, so that would be a second presentation under presentations.
Yeah.
Community risk, you said?
Yep, community risk assessment.
Okay. And unless someone has an objection, we'll accept the agenda as amended. Okay.
Do you want to move adoption of? No,
Well, our next
Public comment.
item is public comment.
yep. Actually, go ahead.
I'm looking at the minutes, I should be looking at the agenda. Yes, next is public comment. Terry, does anybody have their hands up?
We have Rob Pattinson. Rob, you can go ahead.
Morning, gang. Rob Pattinson of Scio Township. I initially was going to talk to you this morning about the minutes from the last meeting. We're not in the agenda packet, but then I looked on the website, and under the Fire Guidance Committee website, you've got the draft minutes for last meeting posted there with all of the other documents that you've got posted. So that's a nice adaptation of making sure that you got the draft minutes ready for the meeting. And then I'll just repeat again, I'll say this every time you meet, the Board of Trustees made a mistake, and it is hampering the ability of the fire department to do their job. And their job is saving lives. Therefore, one of the most critical aspects that duties that this committee can help with is getting that $1.5 million mistake corrected. And also, Andy, I wonder if you have an independent finance director type of person that can help you with that you can have some outside advice, because clearly you're not going to get any inside advice because we don't have the people to do it. And the people who have the information are the ones who made the mistake. I hope that you have some sort of independent way of working out this problem so that you can do your job without having this enormous weight hanging over your head. Thanks, gang. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Rob. Terry?
No more hands.
Well, speaking of the minutes, I was just talking before the meeting, I was just talking with Terry and Ryan, and we're going to change the process a little bit and go to the way the board does it. We're going to actually mark the minutes as draft and attach them to the agenda for the next meeting. I think posting them before they're approved to the meeting records part of the website is probably inappropriate. They should be approved before they're posted to the records part. So next time, I think if we get them all assembled in time, they'll be part of the agenda.
Yes.
So with that in mind, but thank you, Rob, for your comments. I'm glad you were able to find them. With that in mind, does anyone have any comments about the minutes as presented? Any edits, changes, deletes?
Yeah, David, this is Lance. I do.
Okay, Lance.
Go by Lance.
Just during the roll call, I am not listed as being present or absent, and obviously I was there last meeting, so that's my only correction.
Okay. All right. Ryan will correct that.
Corrected.
Well, I remember him. I said, he's that right here?
Yeah, he was here.
Yeah,
I
okay.
remember that. Just must have.
No, he said that. Okay, then with those corrections, prepared to move the minutes? Anyone? Or should we just, okay, Mark,
Motion to approve as amended.
okay. Ryan, do you,
I'll second that.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, do we have any communications and or correspondence? I don't think so. And now we're down to presentations. Chief, you want to go first?
Happy to.
Oh, by the way, for those on in Zoom, you probably saw Assistant Chief Armstrong has appeared, so we'll be graced with his presentation as well.
Let's see.
Now, this has not been posted, correct, Chief?
Nope.
Okay,
No, so what I did is kind of, as this committee recommended or suggested, broke down an operating cost by building and I kind of threw a timeline to it. So I got a little more involved than you had asked, but we'll run through it. One thing that's pretty consistent throughout this entire process is admin and fire prevention. I didn't want to assign that to a station because regardless of where they go, it's an overhead cost rather than an operating of the emergency response side. So I kind of broke it out: emergency response, administration, and then emergency response by station. So bottom line,
so that's for today's staff?
this is adding a training officer and the full-time administrative assistant, which is I think where we need to be. And I included myself, a training officer, full-time admin assistant, vehicle replacement for that position, prevention, assistant chief fire marshal, a half full-time equivalent inspector to assist him, and then also vehicle replacement on that end. Total cost of just over $500,000 for that. About 0.33 mils based on our 1.5 million that we're using, and then I'll pop this in to the breakdown at the end of each option. So option or step one, when fully staffed, Z Road Station is how it looks: a captain, lieutenant, 2 firefighters per shift, 12 full-time equivalents and 4 per shift. There's our admin side. This thing, assuming we get a successful November 2023 millage vote, we'll be able to accomplish this in April 2024.
Really?
Yes, so I wanted to dig a little bit into that process as well. So first of all, a successful millage vote in November means before December 1st, we have to have a public hearing to establish the millage rate. That's required under Act 33. I'd request at that time the addition of the 3 full-time staff. From there, as soon as they give me the go-ahead, it takes me somewhere between 4 and 6 months to get these people on board.
And that would be 3 people.
Correct. So anytime I go to hire someone, I've got an eligibility list. We use a third-party company that costs us nothing. They test for firefighter entry-level positions and other things. We use them for entry-level testing. We go there, we download a list. If I need to hire 3 people, I need to interview 8. We schedule interviews, which takes probably up to a month to get everyone through the interviews. We rank our candidates. We verify their qualifications. Once that process is done and we have our top 3 selections, we then send them off for a physical. We send them off for a psych evaluation, physical, psych evaluation, and a background investigation. So those things, the backgrounds and psych evals can take up to 2 months. So by the time that's all done, we then have 3 candidates that we're ready to move forward with. They're all through the process. They likely work elsewhere and need to give them notice to their employer. So we get them a certain time, say we should have them up by April 1st. The first month or so of employment, they're going to be working 40 hours to simply train, learn how we do things, and then they're divided amongst the shifts.
Questions?
Yes.
Just going back a few years, Doug will remember, when we hired the second set of some of the full-time people, we brought them in and the board actually interviewed them. And the board made the selection. But I gather since then that has changed and you basically,
It is pretty typical for me to make a recommendation and the board do the hiring.
okay, so the board's not basically involved other than for all intents and purposes, rubber stamping your selection.
Generally, it's, yeah.
Okay, that's fine, because I felt totally unqualified to hire a fire person,
Fair.
firefighter, as a board member. Second question is, and this number came up in one of the conversations, and I can't remember if the person who brought this number up is online. I apologize to them, but I understand that in Michigan, there are 400 open positions for firefighters. Now, I don't know if it's 350 or 200 or 450, but does that factor into our issue about hiring firefighters?
Yes, I will say, I don't know if that number is, I don't know the accuracy of that number whatsoever. I will say that I know a number of departments are not fully staffed. And that does factor into how we have to do things. And that comes into play a little bit further as we progress. But yeah, we don't, the number of qualified candidates out there is lower than when I started the fire service. Much lower. You know, I looked for a full-time job. I competed against 200 candidates for 4 openings. And now they're lucky to get 12 candidates for 4 openings.
How does that factor in our decision making? I don't see
The difficulty in hiring, staffing, that's all, just a difficulty. The time it'll take.
Yeah,
it'll be what it'll be though.
Right. It relates to time for us.
Varying on our decision.
Oh, no.
I'd agree,
I just want to know how difficult.
Well, we don't know.
Right.
A year from now, it could change.
Correct.
You hit a recession, people may be looking for jobs.
Potentially, yeah.
So
The previous screen and this screen, you show positions, talked about training, you talked about physicals and screen in psychological and physical conditioning and so on and so forth. All those HR related costs, are they billed back to the fire department budget or are those HR costs within the townships?
They come out of the fire budget.
Fire budget?
Yep.
Okay. And and those costs are fully loaded in your estimate?
It generally come, they're built in. Yeah, we have ongoing costs for physical evaluations, and that would include new people. We have ongoing costs for equipment, so the equipment to put them on would come out of that.
So it's just a
yeah,
standing
so essentially
line item.
it's in there. Yeah.
Okay.
So we look at Zeeb Road fully staffed, emergency response staff about 1.639 million, station costs. And I've kind of bundled stuff together. We need about 127,000 in equipment vehicle replacement a year, about 50,000 in equipment. Building operation, and that includes everything from heat, light, fuel for the vehicles, vehicle maintenance and repairs, EMS supplies, everything down there. I've got about 210,000 for that building. So that station fully staffed just on the emergency response side, just over $2 million, about 1.34 million or 1.34 mils to run that. And when you bump in our admin and prevention side, we're looking at just under 1.7 mils for that building up and running fully.
how does this coincide with the spreadsheet?
So that's where that spreadsheet, I pulled all that data right out.
This spreadsheet. So, yeah.
Shouldn't we be looking at the spreadsheet so we can see comparisons?
We can. I just wanted to run through this in a PowerPoint and then I can pull the spreadsheet up. Option 2, and this is where we start looking at a Wagner station. We bump up to total staff of 24 in emergency response, 8 per shift. It'd be a BC, 2 lieutenants, 5 firefighters. Admin stays the same, and we're able to get this accomplished by my estimates in about April 2027, assuming a successful November 2023 millage vote. A couple of years to open up the station. I figure probably spring of 2026 is reasonable. Due to hiring issues, we'd have to hire 6 in 2026, and I really can't have 12 brand new people on staff. I need to hire 6, I need to get them trained, get them through their probationary period, and then look at hiring the next 6. So
How does it work with, you have new hirees, freshmen. You talked about 2 in, 2 out. Do you pair the freshman with a seasoned veteran
generally the way it works is our senior person is the officer on the engine or a lieutenant position. Generally the next seniors are driver operator, and then our junior person typically sits in the back. So that junior firefighter would generally be working with that the senior officer. If it's a second engine in, then all 3 would work together.
And will you have enough seasoned or veteran for all 3 shifts for 2 buildings?
Fortunately, most of our folks that we have on, even if they've only got 3 or 4 years on, have worked elsewhere. So my junior folks have anywhere from probably 7 to 10 years experience. So I'm comfortable with that.
When is when does a freshman become fully capable of being with the next freshman? If you know what I mean. A
So
year, 2 years, 5 years? It depends on the person, I know.
depends on a person. We've got a 1-year probationary period before we say, all right, you're officially a firefighter, not probationary,
Let me ask my question a different way.
3 to 5 years.
Oh, shoot. So the 6 you hire in 2026 can't be a
really be.
mentor to the 6 you hire in 2027.
Correct. They're still going to be learning,
All right, that was my question.
but they're going to go through the same process with these new folks again. They're going to keep, they're going to keep doing the training with them. And that's, they're going to consistently build that team.
Okay.
Sorry for interjecting this HR stuff.
No, all good.
It's money, it costs. It costs. It costs.
But they're learning on duty.
All right.
So they're on shift, they're working and learning while they work. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the 2 buildings. It's 4 people per building. And if you notice, Wagner's a little bit cheaper. The Zeeb Road Station have a battalion chief and a lieutenant, just a lieutenant at the Wagner Station. A little bit higher equipment cost because we throw our ladder truck down there. So it's a little higher vehicle replacement on there. Everything else pretty much stays the same. Just under 2 million on the Zeeb Road Station, and then just over 2 million on the Wagner Road Station, and a corresponding millage based on 1.5. We throw in our admin staff, and brings us to a total about $4.5 million, or just over 3 mils today. There is capital that's not factored into there, building of between $5 and $7 million to get up and in the ground and operational, and then capital equipment. We need a ladder truck, we need a BC vehicle and a tanker, 6 extra SCBA, and a couple extra pieces of extrication equipment.
So the 2.7 million, BC ladder, tanker, you got your equipment there.
Yep.
And so forth. Then we go to this spreadsheet where you have vehicle replacement. First year's 127 at Zeeb only, 98,187. Option 2. Is the 98 and the 187 already built into?
Yep, that's built into.
Built into the 2.7?
Yep. So if you look at this slide here that I got up for you, that's built into the station number. I've got personnel and I've got station, and that all that vehicle replacement's built in there.
Okay, all right. I can see one adjustment I'm gonna have to make in the analysis, because the 98 and the 187 are in addition to the 2.7. But, okay.
Okay, so your numbers will come down a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good.
So one thing I guess I have a question about, so at the Wagner station, you would have a ladder truck, an engine,
Not yet. We'd have a ladder truck and a tanker.
ladder truck and a tanker, okay.
Correct.
Because for example, one of the things I looked at for comparative last night is Dexter approved their millage. And they're, of course, still trying to figure out exactly what they're gonna do. But their projections for construction costs are somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 million. Obviously, if we could get away with a little bit smaller of a footprint of a station, because we're not gonna have as much equipment staff there.
So I think, and Assistant Chief Armstrong can probably speak to that a little bit, as he's been involved with that process, helping them as well. But station footprint's a little bit smaller for us. They've got more bay space. They've got probably a little more living space in there. Is it pretty comparable?
I mean, we're dorms for 6, so.
I think they had dorms for 9 when I was looking at it.
I think what I saw was somewhere between 12 and 20,000 square feet in Dexter, and we're talking 4,000 to 6,000 square feet, and at 250 to 325 bucks a square foot. You
Yeah.
can see where our
Yeah,
capital.
It makes,
request is
it makes a
gonna
lot more sense. I just wanted to
And
confirm.
Dexter's
that.
is a main station, and we're looking at, you know,
So,
the
A
smaller.
substation,
You know,
yeah.
And it'll be the only station if it's built and manned, correct, or staffed. Is the old station gonna be closed?
yeah, it'll either be a renovation of the old one, extreme makeover, or a new one, and then they'll come up with a secondary purpose for the
sheriff outpost.
Not that it matters for our discussion, but
That's good thought. Yeah.
important because we're looking at 5 to 7 and they're looking at 9. So, okay.
It's a good thing to keep in mind, yeah.
Option 3 here, this is where we add a rescue in. So we go from our Wagner Road station having just fire apparatus to adding a rescue in, excuse me. Response staff of 33 or 11 per shift. Admin and prevention stays the same. And I think we get this fully implemented by April or so of 2029. And again, it's assuming 2023 successful millage vote to allow this to happen. We build on our last plan, and then in 2026, add 6 more people and add another 3 in 2029. Or I'm sorry, 2028 and 2029. So
Mhm. And that includes, but there'll still be a rescue at Z, so.
nope, one rescue
Only one rescue.
and it moves down there.
Okay.
Yep.
At that point, once everything's fully implemented, would you say, what level would we be licensed at for the rescue?
That we can license to transport. And we would have the option for either basic or advanced life support. We'd be able to hire enough folks with the advanced training that we'd be able to implement either plan that the board decides. Overall cost comparison. So vehicle replacement goes up a bit, building operations still about the same. Increase in people. And we kind of split it up a little bit differently here. We would schedule 5 people at Zeeb and the remainder at Wagner. So the cost gets split a little bit differently. Overall cost for Wagner is a bit higher though.
Now, there's something missing here. Oh, wait, go ahead. Go to your next slide. Maybe we'll finish it.
And we look at that, look at the 2 stations, add in admin and prevention, total operating around 7.5 million. My ballpark number 3.83 mils. 0 capital purchases needed to meet this objective though. We've got everything we need. So this is simply adding personnel.
The reason I say there's something missing, Mark has 4 mils. You've got 3.83 mils. So, Mark, do you know what to do? Can you just reach into your spreadsheet and go out?
Yeah,
different-
well, we can pull it up later, but real briefly, one of the participants from the community wanted to see the 1.5 or whatever
Oh,
the
that,
debt load
Yes,
is
yes.
for Z baked in for discussion purposes, whether or not the Board of Trustees accepts that or not is here, either here or there, but it's a placeholder for that debt to extinguish it.
okay, good.
So basically, we need 0.17-ish mils in order to extinguish that debt.
Oh, I don't have the, we can look at it
Okay,
when we
yeah,
get
no
to it,
problem.
when we get to it.
And then lastly,
Extinguish, no pun intended.
yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
Here's our Zeeb Road option 4, step 4 if that's where we decide to go, where we have an engine, ladder, and a rescue in service at that Wagner station. Emergency response staff is up. In this scenario, take that half-time person, add another half to fire prevention, make it a full 1 full-time equivalent. Nothing else changed in admin. Station still opens in spring 2026, but to get here, we're looking at probably 2030 2031 before that's fully implemented.
Was that including?
Fire
F1?
inspector.
Fire inspector, okay.
And that person would float in there somewhere. Most likely, at that point, it would be an internal promotion, as these typically are. So we'd have to hire another entry level person to replace them. And that brings our costs up significantly on response personnel. Vehicle replacement goes up. Building operation goes up. We had an extra vehicle down there. I'm ballparking 20,000 a year between maintenance and fuel for the vehicle. So we had another 20,000 in that. Here's our millage rate, basically 1.6 and 3.0. And in prevention, I come up with about $7.5 million or 5 mils. There is a little bit of capital to get us this one as well. One engine, we need 4 more SCBA, a couple more Hearst tools, and we need another fire inspector's vehicle. And I can pull up that spreadsheet if folks would like to see that.
Which one?
This one.
The one I'd kicked out the committee for comparison here.
I'm still trying to digest Mark's. It's like a turkey dinner.
I don't know if I can zoom in or anything like that. But that kind of is the breakdown of the cost there. Operations and then adding in administration. Kind of a summary of kind of what we looked at here.
And you accounted for all these numbers in your numbers, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
And this line I'm going to highlight here, that one going across is basic cost per station. Approximate millage, and then on the very bottom, total overall millage and cost.
I thought on option 2, we were fully staffed at Z.
We are.
There's a $400,000 increase. Is that a new piece of equipment or what? Between option 2 and option 3, there's a $400,000 per year increase.
So
Cost of Z.
in that case, we'd move administrative offices out of there and make another sleeping area so that we can sleep one more person down there.
Okay. So there'd be room for 5. then you're saying. Okay,
But yeah, we'd have to, there'd be no administrative office space there then.
okay.
These numbers here again don't don't include any capital costs. Capitals gotta be addressed separately, differently, however this committee, the board decides to do so.
And just to confirm this, these current millage projections are based off of the existing tax base and not any increase,
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I tried to look at escalators and a little beyond my area of expertise.
Yeah, I know. I try my best to sort of come together with the projects I'm aware of and estimates for their taxable value based off of averages. It's all in gas plus when construction for some things will actually be done.
Yeah, I think Mark, it's more Mark's wheelhouse than mine by a long shot. So
I did a tax base projection, just based on 2% CPI factor. Because, we're 5, this year with 5.5. Next year, we don't know what it's gonna be. Could it be up or down or?
I think 5's our cap under the law, right?
Yes. Right.
But still-
Change of CPI not to exceed 5.
Yeah. So any questions on this data here? Anything anyone wants to discuss here?
None.
This is Mitch. I had a question. In option 3, the capital needed to start at 0, but
Correct.
in option 2, it's much more. I was just wondering if you could explain why.
Yeah, so option 2, we add in a second station and we need to add vehicles to put in that station. With option 3, we're simply adding personnel to fully staff out those vehicles. Does that make sense?
They incurred the capital in option 2, so in options 3, but wait a minute, no, he's right. Because the option 3 assumes we go with option 3 and we forego 2, so you're still gonna need to start up in 3, aren't you?
No, I mean, it's a step. It's a
Unless you
progression.
ramp up. Okay.
Once we get to, if we're to get to option 3, that's
I got it.
assuming we've already
Done
completed
that
option 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
I'm wondering if we should start calling these step 1, step 2, step 3.
Okay.
But until the people, the residents approve a millage, it's really options. Mark?
So how are you gonna present this to the public, I guess, as step up? But I think they're gonna have, might have some difficulty understanding if it's quite complex like that.
Yeah, so I think what, it may become clearer. My hope is that this committee will say, hey, we think that this township should get to X. And this goes to the township board, and the board says, yes, we agree with this committee. We're gonna put together a millage to get to X. At that point, it's a little easier for me to articulate, hey, this is our end goal and here's our steps to get there.
Well, here's the thing, the difficult, Bob, you were gonna say something?
No, was that Mitch that first
I
question?
think so.
I think Mitch is right. Because you're asking the people, asking us to select an option. We're not gonna select a step up. We're gonna select an option. So that 3.83 total millage, does that include the capital needed to start in option 3? It
Nope.
doesn't.
Nope, zero capital.
Well,
Correct. That's just the
but it
operating
isn't
side.
zero capital. If we
No,
choose
I
option
agree.
3,
I understand.
we're
What
not gonna include the capital.
what I'm
and
saying
reflect
is-
that in the millage.
I simply put together operational costs.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bob. When you go to the voters, you're asking them for a millage approval of whatever the number is. And if we were to do this step up, or, yeah, the step up, gradual step up over a period of time, so we may not levy the full authorized mill, the board of trustees each November or whenever they do their budget, they would say not to exceed whatever that number is, so long as it's below the maximum ballot initiative question. So Bob, I see what you're saying.
Well, I think there's a middle ground here.
Yeah.
And that is, let's assume, either straw man here, let's assume we think as a group, we want to propose that the township move to fully implement option 3 through a 3-step process. Levying the 1.75, I think, for option 1, the first year or 2, and then the 3 or 1, 3, whatever the numbers are. Whatever millage it takes to get to option 1, then whatever, or step 1, whatever millage it takes to get to step 2, and then the final millage to get to step 3. And that takes us almost 10 years, 9 years.
Ballpark, yeah.
And at that point in time, we come back and we say, okay, we're at step 3, option 3. Do we need to go to option 4? Do we need 10 more people? Do we need 6 more people? What is our next millage rate? So I think I think it has to be explained as a multi-step process to be where we want to be. I don't think we can just automatically levy, what is it, 4 mills for option 3 and then start hiring people. I mean, it would be unreasonable.
When I put this data together, I assumed that for us to get to option 2, option 1 is fully done. For us to get to option 3, option 2 is fully done.
That's logical.
How do we explain that to the residents who aren't really understanding about what a fire station is and how long it takes and all that stuff? Well, that, we don't have to discuss it, just think about it. This will be an interesting proposition, because I think we're going to have to.
Oh, yes, without
Have
question.
to give them the big picture, whatever that number is. And I think option 4 might be out of our reach at this point in time. Not that it shouldn't be, but this first millage So maybe we should start thinking about option 3 and how we get there and how we present it to the people. First of all, the board,
And then the people.
and then the people.
Yep.
Capital
Fully
P.
agree.
Like you said, we don't necessarily have to discuss that part yet, but at the same time, kind of need to think of how to explain it with as much information as possible, but as simply as possible, because the more numbers you add,
Yeah.
the more complexity you add, the more confusing it is to everybody. And as we all know, sometimes the way things are even worded on the ballot is confusing and opposite of what you think you're actually voting for.
Exactly.
Yep.
And if the ballot proposal is this long,
Nobody's gonna read it.
they're gonna say no.
Yep, I agree. Any other questions on this data here?
So just to confirm one more time, I guess, after all those discussions, this does not, this model, this cost does not include any of the capital improvement cost to build Wagner. Okay. That, as you said, that has to be addressed separately.
Yep.
Got it.
You know, I think Mark made an interesting point in his documents. If it's a 10-year millage, you know, that, and we bond for 10 years, that capital cost is expired in 10 years. So we're good, you know, and then our operating millage goes down.
Well, we still need to buy the equipment though.
But we've got equipment replacement baked
Oh,
into
that's
our
right. That's
projection, so
That's right.
in theory, when it comes time to replace the engine over here, we've got the funds available.
We'll have $1 million in the bank. Write a check. Gotcha.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing this. Be happy to answer any other questions this committee may have for me.
Just bring that one back up once again. Scroll down so we can see your
Some of the notes.
footnotes, yeah. You know, one thing I wanted to point out here, in finance, you always read the footnotes. Just like if you're the planning department, you're always looking at the notes that are on the drawings. So in this one, it says excludes the payback of Z and excludes the building cost and excludes to buy land. And I just wanted to point that out. So there will be differences between this projection and what you're later going to see when we pull up what I sent out to you guys last time.
But the millage rates are very close. Yours and his.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if we figure $500,000 piece of property, it's, you know, a third of a mil. And if we buy that in year X, whatever that is, it's, you know, it's not that far off.
Now, Mark, I couldn't figure it out. But does your projection assume a 10-year bond to build the building?
Yes,
Okay.
and to pay down the Z debt.
So basically it's a $10 million bond, roughly. $8.5, $9 million bond.
We can get into those. On the agenda.
Did you want to see some of the Chief Armstrong's projections?
Yeah, before Mark,
Yes.
And not projections as much as snapshots. I have a 5-year data set of our run reports and call reports. And so I've just been looking at different ways to slice those up to graphically illustrate sort of what our department does. What do I need to do to
Just, you should just open that Zoom up to full screen. It'd be the bottom right corner there.
but
Yep.
Gary, is he permitted to share
And
a
share
screen?
screen. Shove it across the
Thank
bottom. You do need to mute it though. You're not muted, you should mute.
No, yeah, I'm muted.
And that one. No, down one. Right there. There you go, double click that. There we go.
This is literally too many chiefs.
You should go scroll through your presentation.
Everybody else is picking it up.
To the
Future.
yourself.
Terry, can you, Doug? There we go.
Now I'm muted.
Very good. Yep.
I have my speakers muted, not my microphone muted. All right. So I've just been putting in a community risk assessment, which is something I think will be useful as we go to educate the public on why we want to invest in the fire department and have some documentation that it is based on what we have determined to be the risks with staffing and equipment and infrastructure being solution or mitigation strategies to help offset those risks. So this is very draft, just putting together some history on the department, a look at the township, the community, demographics, Census Bureau info, income. But what I think is interesting to look at now is just, again, some snapshots of our data. So this is 2017 through 2021. And
Got number of calls? I can't tell.
yes,
Okay.
this is total number of calls for those years. And
That's COVID. That's what the drop is. Is that from COVID?
yeah, there was a little drop, but as you can see, there's a trend line that still is trending up even with that drop in COVID. And this year you have a projection on where we're gonna end up total call wise.
Ballpark in 1,500 this year.
Yeah, so again, we're gonna continue to,
Is there a breakdown of what those incidents are?
yes, absolutely.
We can put this on the website afterwards. This is public information.
Super preliminary.
Yeah, I mean, once we,
Well, okay, maybe not today, but eventually.
yeah,
Okay, good,
because
good.
this is just kind of a first cut just in the last few days, really.
Do you have a bar graph or a chart? It shows the incidents trending upward. How about our population base? Is it trending the same direction or at the same pace or rate? Or just, is it like?
Yeah, that's an
aging?
interesting question, because the census, in 10 and in 20 are quite different, because in 10, we included the village of Dexter, and then it became a city. So our population actually dropped within the township and then has inched up. And I haven't looked at that, a detailed breakdown of that number to understand what that trend is.
Is your cooperative agreement, are those incidents built in here as well?
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. They are. There is the ability to split them out, but it takes some programming, and I haven't quite gotten to that yet. So, and again, two graphs are the same, just different formats. Then this maybe gets to your question of, what are those calls? So I did it both for the 5-year period as well as, just in the last year. You see there's not really much change. Our good intent calls are going up a little bit, and that may be just based on some of our
More
change in response pattern.
and refining our,
But here, see, here's why I asked the question. And look at the slice and dice that you did. Medical is the brunt of the calls. Okay, fire remained at 5%. But the cost seems to me is more in addressing the fire incidents versus the medical. But yet we need more help on the medical side. So maybe the real cost to the whole plan should look more at the medical side. Okay?
When you say
Which
the
wouldn't require all that high-priced equipment necessarily.
if it were just medical.
Well, look at what the incidents are. Let the data drive you to where we should spend our money.
Right.
I agree, Bob. It's a good observation.
I mean, I guess the other side of that is that understanding that fire mitigation to really make a difference requires significant investment in people and apparatus to make a difference. And so, yes, the day-to-day call investment is in medical, but you've got to have a robust and reliable workforce and equipment to really make a difference in a fire where you've got huge impact if you don't.
Couple questions here, if I may.
Mhm.
What is good intent calls? The blue, the baby blue there.
Yeah,
That's
the
that's
20
broken down in one of the sheets I sent
Okay.
out earlier. I can pull that up as soon as he's done talking about this.
Is there a way to put a number on these pieces of the pie?
Instead of a percent, sure.
Well, I mean, it looks like medicals on the right-hand chart is about 50%. So that if we're running a $2 million budget, does that mean it costs us $1 million to run the medical calls? Or is it only 500,000 because the equipment is less, gas is less? That's, I think, to help understand Bob's question is, it looks like it's a lot, but does it cost a lot? That's, I think, the question we need to, if we can we answer that?
So I think to run the medical calls, I think is really wear and tear on vehicles and fuel. Right?
It's two guys.
2 or 3, depending on which vehicle goes out. And we've got to have a fire engine and a fire station anyways. So that initial buy is there, and it's how we use it.
I guess to go along with that question, right now, since we're responding to those incidents, HVA or their parent company charges people if they're transported to the hospital for transport services.
Yep.
To that extent.
Yep.
Scio Township currently charges
Nothing.
nothing.
Correct.
Because I actually pulled data from the city of Livonia, and Livonia charges, depending if you're a resident or not resident, they charge different amounts for different levels of service.
Yep.
So it's just
That's pretty
interesting,
typical.
interesting to go through that and see, okay, there's a little bit of a discount for a resident, that makes sense, you're paying into the tax base and whatever, and depending on what level of service you need, it can be a higher cost if it's much more intensive, of course.
I think rather than problem solve on this particular issue, I think this is a very important chart to put a placeholder in and have a more robust discussion on where you focus your capital and your operating. Is it on 60% or 55% of the services? Or is it on the remaining 40% or 55%, whatever it is? I think that's a valid observation that I think has to be vetted and ready to respond if the Board of Trustees ask that question. Valid concern and equally fair as well. So anyway, not to throw water on the discussion, but
Well, I mean, it goes back to David will remember this because this comment's been around for a long time. We're not required to have a fire department. We're not required to put out fires. So you could say, we don't want to buy any fire trucks and we'll just let them burn and just pay people off, or, if their house burns down.
I don't think that's the point.
No, but
What I'm getting at is maybe I buy another ambulance rather than a tank and hire the people for that ambulance. And you keep your fire trucks back at the station waiting for a fire while you're answering. Look here, medical responses by year, it almost doubled. So to say we don't have to tell fires, I don't know where you're going with that.
well, I'm responding to your question of you have to invest in both. You have to be prepared for both.
Sure.
And obviously the fire side has a much higher expense, and that, investing just in the medical side at the detriment of the fire side has a cost too. So it's not as simple as our highest volume of calls is one type. And so we need to really focus all of our resources in in that time, so.
Nobody's saying it's an all or nothing.
Right.
I'm just saying we gotta look at the data, let the data tell us how to spend our money. And just tell you where I'm coming from. I feel I have a job or a responsibility to protect the taxpayers here. And I'm gonna be cynical because that's what I'm supposed to be. Okay?
Mhm.
And that's what we're all supposed to be.
Sure.
You know, you want to create a straw man, and it's our job to challenge the straw man and then convince us. That's the way I look at it. Okay? I'm just not gonna go and say, give me 3 more mills, double your millage or triple your millage. It's not fair.
No, I'm in agreement. I'm just,
And I'm still on the wicket that if that senior citizens home wants us to answer 100 times a year, they ought to pay me for it.
I kind of thought about that, because
With the transport license, they will.
Yeah,
Then that should be one of our goals, to get that transport license ASAP.
Comes with option 3. I've got the staff to do it.
Make it option 1 then. Why do I need to wait for option 3?
Because in order to license it, I've got to staff it daily, and we don't have the
Okay.
personnel to do so until we get to.
I'm with you on the staffing, okay? I'm with you on that. It's some of the other things that I'm challenging, questioning. Okay?
Yeah.
And if we need to get that licensing, that ought to be at the top of our list so that we can legally go after and getting our money back.
But in order to staff it, I think what the chief is trying to say, in order to staff it, we need 10 more people, 6 more people, whatever, so many more people that we cannot house in this station. So we have to build another station. Or have a
I'm not
trailer.
sure I heard that.
is that, would you say that's correct?
Yes.
Now, would you be able to house these people in a trailer, the way you housed them when we were remodeling the fire station? Not nice, not comfortable, not comfortable.
We can do anything. I'd say that is very much less than optimal.
I'm being extreme here. Because obviously spending $9 million to be able to charge $200 every time we go to the medical center is, you know, what's the rate of return on it? But if for a year, we could spend, I don't know what it costs to rent a trailer.
We spent $50,000 a month.
$50,000 a month,
$50,000 a month,
600 grand for that?
never mind.
A year?
Yeah, ballpark, yeah.
Wow. Holy cow.
So to get to 2 in, 2 out, which is really our desired goal, right? I can't get the license with that?
We can, but we'd have to give it up to implement the rest of the plan for a time period.
I understand.
So in order to have the transport license, you have to have the vehicle staffed 24/7. So
Staffed by 1 or 2?
2. So let me say this, we could do it with overtime, potentially.
Without an additional station.
Yes,
And without a trailer?
without a trailer. However, when we go to move into the other station, we're gonna need to pay a lot more overtime until we get everyone on board.
To maintain the BLS?
To maintain the license, yes.
B or A?
B,
B.
to maintain it.
and I think just operationally to understand what that means for the personnel. 2 people, right now, 2 people or 3 respond to the scene of a medical emergency. They stabilize the patient, the ambulance hopefully appears in a timely fashion, picks up the patient and takes them to the hospital, and those 2 firefighters return back in service. If we're transporting, that commitment goes from probably 20 minutes to an hour and a half, because they're now taken out of our jurisdiction and going to Chelsea or to Ann Arbor to the hospital, dropping off the patient, filling out the paperwork,
cleaning.
resupplying and cleaning up and coming back. And so all that time that they're not around and available,
We don't have the ability to
we,
respond to
now
fires.
our fire staffing has really dropped. And so that's the other side that I was just trying to,
That,
you
that
know,
part makes sense.
explain. And it wasn't disagree with, it was just to show that, you know, if we just focus on the medical side, we are potentially leaving some gaps on the fire side. And that's the whole crux of the discussion.
I think the other side of that equation, fire a fire happens, so you have 2 in, 2 out, all 4 guys from the Zeep, all 4 folks from the Zeep station are there, then you get a medical call.
And then
Same
we're
with
calling our
someone else.
neighbors or calling HVA to handle it.
And if I could offer in here too, our medical control authority won't let us take every call. They require ALS to be dispatched to every call. In that scenario, with a BLS licensed vehicle, we might get 100 transports a year.
Expand on that.
So all EMS operates under what's called a medical control authority. And I touched on this in one of our first meetings. The state says, here's how EMS can function, drops a bunch of protocols out there. Each area creates a medical control authority. So our problems here in Washington County are much different than the Upper Peninsula's problems for EMS. Our medical control authority establishes rules for us to work under when we're licensed on the EMS side. They require ALS to be the primary response vehicle. We can license our BLS vehicle. We may get 100 transports out of it a year, maybe.
What would you get out of an ALS transport?
All of them. 100%.
How much, let's go back to how much more will we need to upgrade to an ALS transport?
I can't do it in one station because I don't have enough people to make paramedics.
Okay.
I've got to start hiring paramedics.
And the only way, but you can charge for the transport or the call for a BLS,
For the transport,
for the transport.
I can't charge for a call.
So you can't charge to go out to the senior center to help somebody stand up.
I don't know about that. I know HVA does. I don't know how they do it. I can,
I was told,
traditionally we charge for a transport.
I was told yesterday, if they push arrive on the scene, it's $150.
HVA,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is.
Well, just to lift somebody up. And then if they assess them, if they start an IV, if they take an EKG, if they give them oxygen, if they put them on their stretcher and transport them, those fees
cost.
exponentially
To
climb.
give you an example, once again, I pulled this from Livonia because it's the public data I could find when I looked for this last couple of days. BLS non-emergency, however they classify that, a resident gets charged $340 for a response.
That's
for
a transport.
Doesn't specifically outline that here, but potentially. For a BLS emergency, it's $485 for a resident. ALS non-emergency is $460. ALS emergency is $630, and then they charge $14 a mile for
That's
mileage.
straight Medicare reimbursement rates. They just mimic what Medicare charges for transport. That's what that data
What they
is.
reimburse for. Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And we can't do any of that until we're
Licensed
licensed.
to transport, correct.
And because if we only go to BLS, Medical Control Authority assumes we cannot respond to everyone, so they'll just give us one every couple of days.
No, we'll respond to every call, but the paramedic arriving from HVA is legally bound to treat and transport that patient. They'd have to assess and say, okay, you guys can take this patient, or if they never show up, we can transport.
I started reading some of because Livingston and Washington are combined, I started reading because they're all public documents and some of them are extremely lengthy, extremely confusing. And it's a lot as to what you can do in certain situations.
So I think the answer to Bob's question, it's a very complex question, very complex answer.
I'm back on something more basic.
Yeah, go for it.
It's most of the runs are medical. And maybe if I focused on that and just bought another ambulance and put the staff in, forget about charging or not charging now. Okay, that comes later.
Yeah.
How does that respond to the needs of the community in total? Because fires have not gone up according to this, still 5%.
But they've gone up.
They've gone
higher
up.
number.
And when you say to me that, well, they could be off on an ambulance run and need a fire, then I'd come back and say statistically, how many times does that happen? Where you had both occurrences at once. And you can't have a belt and suspenders approach. I mean, that's ideal.
I mean, fires are going up. Here's your fire responses, both for all fires, which, is car fires, building
Trash cans,
fires,
trash cans.
Trash
brush
cans.
fires,
Yeah.
as well as structure fires, actual building fires.
And you know why it's gone up on both cases, what the breakdown of each of those are?
I do have, I do have a graph here. It's small, but
We can get at and try to solve.
this just shows all fires by category over all the years. I haven't broken it out by, I mean, it can be broken out in a number of different ways. So we can look at each category by year and try to see if there's one thing driving or accounting for the overall.
So
That big bar,
that big bar's building fires, correct?
Yes.
So you would say that the fire inspections and some of the prevention activities is trying to track that number down, correct?
Yes.
Sure.
you would still respond to a structure fire even if it had sprinklers.
Of course, yeah.
Probably get there to turn the sprinklers off because the fire's already out.
Well,
No,
I mean,
they contain a fire.
the goal is to contain a fire. I mean, Home Depot's lost 2 stores in the last year that were fully sprinkled. Walmart distribution center in Indiana completely burned down, even though it was fully sprinkled. So it's, oh yeah, million square feet. So it's,
Water comes from the sprinkler.
you know, there are scenarios where the contents and what's burning can overwhelm the system, depending on how it unfolds. But for the most part, sprinklers are a huge help in at least managing it until we get there and finish putting it out.
Okay, so sprinklers, for all intents and purposes, never, almost never put out the fire.
Their job is to contain it so we can get there and extinguish it. But there are,
Keep it from spreading.
yeah,
basically.
there are instances where they do completely extinguish the fire. We just make sure it's out. We ventilate the smoke out and control the water. That does occur, but their primary purpose is to contain fire, not completely extinguish.
I have a quick comment here real quick. This is Lance about the billing stuff. I know if you guys look on the Scio Township Code of Ordinances, Article 5, Finance, and go Division 2, Fire Services or Fire Service Charges, there is a spot in here that we can bill for EMS calls, pretty much any sort of call. But I believe that'd probably have to be up to the Board of Trustees to enact that or figure out a way to do it. So there is the option.
Lance?
Yes.
Is there information, what you're looking at, of when that ordinance was passed?
Let me look.
I'm wondering if it's pre-HIPAA. Because isn't what HIPAA now prevents us from doing that transport?
A license prevents us from doing the transport. HIPAA is the requirements we have to follow if we're to bill.
Okay, I'm asking the wrong question, but
It appears the ordinance was done in August 21st of 1990.
wow, 32 years ago.
So the technical the technical language is in place. Should you get your license, then you can start, how do you want to start implementing
Yeah.
what Lance is describing?
So there is a cost to it too.
Yeah.
To meet all the regulations, every agency uses a third-party biller. It's an expert. So probably the first 10,000 a year is absorbed by that biller, and then proportion after that. So there's a point in time where it makes sense based on number of transports.
And I know that Ann Arbor looked into the actual cost for that biller and if it was gonna be periodic or episodic as opposed to sort of every call, there's some threshold that you want to get over, or you end up expending more time or monetary resources to send the bill than you're actually collecting back.
Yeah, you
from
got
that.
to follow up with people because not everybody pays their bills.
Right, right, collecting and.
Continuing down Bob's line of thought, does it make sense? I'm gonna ask this question, it may sound stupid. Does it make sense to staff an office somewhere with a rescue and 2 guys, and that's it? And all they do is medical, never fires?
No, I need the people on fires.
No. You have you guys on fires.
Oh,
You have your people on fires, guys and girls.
so let me answer your question. We get to a point where we've got any number of buildings, right? And say there's space is no object. If we say we're now doing 5,000 medical calls a year, I need 3 ambulances in this building, absolutely. That makes sense.
No, but I mean, right now, how many calls are we doing, how many total medical calls are we doing? I couldn't see it,
All,
500?
say 60% of 1,500.
Oh, okay, so 900, so 3 a day,
55 or 60 for fire.
3 a day.
And those are not all transports.
No, I'm not talking about transport, I'm talking about the
Just
2
responding.
firefighters, 2 rescue people who go and pick the person up, who go and do the chest compressions, who go and all that stuff that you don't need a hose and an axe for. If we had 2 people, 24/7, sitting in, basically, sitting in the rescue squad, waiting to go out on this call, what would that cost? You know, and you know, I know, you don't have to figure that out. It's 9 people, or excuse me, 2, 4, 6,
6 people.
6 people
Realistic.
and a rescue truck. That does nothing but medicals. So here's what we're trying to do. I think the problem that we're trying to face, we got 2 problems. One is very, very expensive, putting out fires.
Mhm.
One is, excluding the people cost, is relatively inexpensive. You buy a rescue truck and you keep it equipped. And that's all. And then you have to hire the 2, 4, 6 people to man that truck. Or that vehicle. But they don't do fire. Does that not make sense? Because then they're not really firemen, they're rescue.
But it's a net cost to me.
What do you mean it's a net cost?
If I can say I do 1,500 medical calls a year and bill them all at $400,
Sure. It's kind of.
it's gonna cost me $1 million to put those people on a rescue.
Yeah, but you may save it on the fire.
I think you're muted again.
Okay. I think the part where the problem solved, but
You're unmuted.
Mark, you got it.
I have a question. Chief, who do you have to send out multiple vehicles for every call? Do you have to send out a fire truck even if it's a medical emergency?
So I can't give you a straight yes or no. If I've got 3 people on duty, I send a fire truck on every call because I can't abandon fire protection for medicals. If I've got 4 people on duty and it's a minor medical call, I will send 2 out in a rescue. If it's a major medical call, I will send all 4 out in the engine and the rescue. Theory being, if that incident gets stabilized, now I can pick up that engine to go on a car accident or something else. You know, there's calls where we need 4 to 6, 7, 8 people on scene, and there's calls where 2 people are adequate.
Medical calls?
Yep, medical calls only.
And I'll
So it's
say
not
real
simple.
quick, guys, before Chief got here, when there was just 2 of us on duty, we would just take out our Chevy Tahoe rescue vehicle, had 0 water, had 0 anything on it. And there were times we were on medical calls or coming back to the station and got dispatched to fires and then had to go all the way back to the station, grab our gear, get on the fire truck and then go. So it even delayed us even more.
That's what I thought.
Okay, I'd like to, this is not the time for that, but I'd like to pursue this avenue if we can. And maybe we can't before December 1st, but.
Well, just to that point, rather than, this is a valid issue to discuss in detail. Possibly going to Bob's point is that next week we come prepared to talk about prioritization of option or step 1, 2, and 3, and where does this EMS or this medical component of it, where is it focused right now? Option 2 or whatever, and should we prioritize it and make it a 1? Or split them out
1.5 or 2.
1.5 or 2. But this is, I think it's a valid concern, you know, if our homeowners, our residents, our businesses, you know, if they're using medical more than fire, I think we ought to prioritize it accordingly, you know, and I think there's support for the fire department to get from 1 to 4, but where do we juggle, where do we prioritize those pieces within the overall plan? And obviously, this is a 10-year plan.
And one of our commenters, Rob Pattinson, said, primary goal of the fire department is saving lives. And I think, my gut would be, you save more lives with medical than you do with fire. You save property with fire. You save lives with medical. Now, you do save a few lives when you get there, because there's only 2 or 3 or 4 residents in the home, and you only go on, what, 70, 60 fires a year?
66.
Huh?
Structures, yeah.
Structures, yeah.
Well,
So,
we've had fatal vehicle fires, we've had,
oh, yeah, well, okay, all right. all right.
but, and I will say that, with an apartment building, we generally consider those always occupied.
Mhm.
And if we show up quick, knock down an apartment fire while it's 1 or 2 rooms rather than 3 units,
Mhm.
we've got a much better chance of saving those people who aren't aware of the fire in other units.
Okay, well, all right, yeah, this is not a black and white issue.
I think to Mark's point, we obviously need to prioritize the medical side of things from a call generation standpoint, but we can't do it at the detriment of. the
I'm sorry,
medical side.
I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, we need to prioritize maybe from a number of calls issue, the medical side of the problem, but we cannot do it to the detriment of the fire side, which
Oh, yes.
is much more resource intensive. Well, not necessarily as numerous in calls, it still needs resources, and if you take
They're high frequency, low occurrence events.
Mhm.
Or
high intensity.
High intensity, low
Yeah,
frequency.
the other way
I
around.
gotcha.
Hopefully not.
Yeah,
Other fire departments have faced this problem. Do you know how they've solved it? Or they just go with the fire staff doing both fire and rescue?
that is the industry standard. Even Detroit runs medical calls now on their fire department. They're sending engines on priority medical calls.
Detroit is not a good example of fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, there's that.
I'm simply saying there was a time,
Operationally, they had 2 separate divisions.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
yeah, they're,
And it's only been recently that they've,
So they tried the medical versus fire.
yeah.
5 years ago, they had a fire department that didn't respond to medicals, so they had EMS that only responded to medicals. Those units are integrated now, and all new Detroit firefighters spend their time on the ambulance, move on to the engine, and those engines are going on their priority medical calls.
Oh, but isn't that what we have here in Washington County?
Yes.
Because HVA, primary responsibility is medicals,
Yep.
and ours is fire.
Yep.
But because HVA can't do it, we gotta do it.
Well, we do first response,
Okay, all right.
Moving on.
Moving on. Doug,
That's what I've got right now.
well, that particular slide took us down an interesting road. Thank you.
I mean, but like, as you said, we gotta follow the data and, but I wanted to just show we've got the data and we can cut it different ways as the discussions come up, and we go, wonder, can we look at this? It might take a little while, but we've got the data here. So yes, we can help that, not necessarily drive our decisions, but inform our decisions. So.
And to Ryan's point, I can respond to a medical and a fire engine. I can't respond to a fire and an ambulance.
Mhm. Okay. Anything else, Doug?
Okay.
You're gonna, well, when you have that polished or refined, can you post it?
Absolutely. Happy to share it. That's
If you
why I'm
wanna-
creating this whole risk assessment is sort of a document that can be shared widely, because then that will help inform what the priorities are and what strategies we use to, whether it's this big resource level or even just at our day-to-day priority level.
Oh, a question for you and the chief, the assistant chief and the chief. Would you be comfortable posting that as is with the word draft on it? Or is it not quite good enough?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not ready for
Okay,
that.
all right, all right.
Not ready for prime time.
Not ready, not even ready for late night.
It doesn't even have all the data in it yet. It's,
Okay.
it's got placeholders for data. and
Right.
it's just-
I mean, a number of these graphs I just made last night, so, I mean, I'm still
Okay, all right.
Familiar with the data.
Couple more martinis and you'll have it all ironed out.
Okay, Mark, you're on.
All
I
right,
think. Anything else?
where are you on your agenda?
Probably 9 new business. Unless we're still at 7 for
Or
March
old.
presentation.
Are we at old?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we're in old business.
What do you have for that?
I don't think we have any old business, do we?
You know, I'm still stuck though. And we talked about it, but we didn't say we're gonna take it to the next step. If we decided that we're gonna respond to this medical issue with greater staff and another ambulance or whatever, doesn't that free up the fire side too? So.
Yeah.
Doesn't that analysis really need to be done?
Define free up. What do you mean by free up?
Well, he's sending out an engine with an ambulance. Don't send out the engine. Get another ambulance, respond to those medical issues. Now you're back here waiting for a fire to happen.
He sends out the engine because he doesn't have enough people.
Fine, but he's sending out the engine. You see what I'm getting? You're freeing up the resources for fire by focusing on the medical.
But he sends out
There's
the
gotta be-
engine because he only has 3 guys.
I heard it all.
Okay,
I think there's something in there.
okay.
And it ought almost be a 1A kind of analysis.
A
Yeah,
1A.
for, I don't know, new business or presentations for next week, let's come back and let's look at those prioritizations and how do we, are there alternatives there to refine 1, 2, 3, 4, where we address the medical maybe in 1 or 1.5 or something like that.
See, without, you know, conjuring up the numbers, it seems to me, you're gonna respond to the public better because the medicals are the bigger issue. And you may reduce some of the cost because you're keeping your heavy equipment back when you don't really need it. Don't need to send it out.
So right here, that's in part what we do with option 3. We've got fire apparatus there and a rescue there. When a minor medical comes in, the rescue handles it.
Yeah, but option 3 is 4 mils. I'm getting back to like a 1A.
you're thinking basically before we even add the second station, we could somehow address
Yes.
the medical
Yes.
thing.
Again,
Yeah.
what's my cost benefit analysis?
So let me find it here.
But I think the issue is housing those people. Where do they sleep? Because they're on duty for 24 hours.
This
They
in
go home for
part,
3 days or 2 days.
Well,
I
aren't
think
they 8-hour shifts if I hire 2, 2, and 2 just
No,
for
it's
the
24
ambulance?
hours. Yes.
24 on.
Even for the ambulance?
Well, oh, wait, good
It's
point,
firefighters.
Bob.
Why?
These would be trained firefighters?
we get here, I can do that.
Why can't they be EMS paramedic type people?
No, so you're saying non-firefighting people, basically have our own
Us
ACA.
HVA.
So that
through
would,
the fire
so-
department.
So,
Uh,
okay,
Okay,
so we look at 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts, right?
Yeah.
So that's 2, 4, 6.
Or 12-hour shifts?
So what number of people do I have to hire to do that?
You tell me? 6
Well,
or
I've got a
4?
staff 24/7.
Yeah.
For 12-hour shifts and two per shift.
plus I have slack.
Yeah, what does it take? I've never worked in a 40-hour, 24-hour space, but. So
Well,
that's
the other
6 people to work
6 people.
Monday through Friday. No,
Well, Lance is on. Lance, what do you say? How much overtime you want to give the folks? So that determines how many people.
There's only so much overtime. I mean, you're talking 7 days a week.
yeah, 7 days a week to have 2 people dedicated to an ambulance irrespective of fire protection is gonna cost me $1 million.
It's like my skilled trades. They like working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. They made big money in the plants.
That's a big number too. I mean, I'm gonna spend at least $1 million, probably more,
Well, but we're
over
gonna,
what I'm spending today.
but every option is spending more than what we're spending today. I'm just saying it frees up your whole fire thing. And that may be a reduction in cost overall, net to the community. You
Fire
may
cost-
be able to
Fire
satisfy
costs don't go down though.
more of the issues. Well, I don't know about that. Because you're not sending out that engine or tanker or whatever to every medical call. And based on the data, you're responding to the community needs a whole lot better.
But again, we're back to Ryan's point of now we're handling medicals at the expense of fire, our
No,
point
you're
here.
not. You've added a whole medical unit.
So in your view, looking at this, it's option one, 12 FTEs, fire response people,
Yep, full-time equivalents, yep.
which are 4 per shift, which is 4 per day because they're full 24-hour shifts, so it's 4 per day. That's the fire staff. Now we add to that the 2 per 8-hour shift for, what's 7 times, for 21 shifts a week. Now, how that is staffed, I don't know, because the same 6 people can't staff all 7 days. Because they gotta take some time off. Physically, emotionally, and logically, they have to think. So it's not just 6, it's
9.
8, 10.
I ballparked it at 8 when I was just doing the math in my head. I mean, we could figure that out later, but as far as 8 people, another rescue, and,
We'd let them take our rescue. We got now. We
oh
don't.
yeah, well, yeah, you got the rescue now.
My fire staff will just staff an engine.
The interesting idea about that, to Bob's point, is we could theoretically, at least in the interim, maybe either find another space or theory, might be able to staff it out of here. I don't know if that's realistic, but you would be able to respond to those medical calls. And I don't know what the pay scale is for, I guess then it comes back to the question, do you do firefighters versus paramedics? That's a whole nother question. I mean, from a service level response, it makes sense. Absolutely, because you respond to the community needs much faster of the highest call generator. It still leaves the rest of the questions that we have about the fire service aspect of it that we have to figure out. But it does solve one problem that does have increasing trend, it does have calls.
And 3 people gets me that too. I
That's
got
true.
my refuse staff,
True.
rescue staff 24/7. And they go on all the medicals, and when there's a fire, they go on fire. I guess it's 3 people. That's it.
You have to house them somewhere. Can you house them temporarily in a hotel room?
Gosh,
That's a good question. That is the other issue, is where do you house these
people.
2 people, 3 people, whatever it is. But let's say we did that. And so there's 2 people who respond to 3 calls a day, where we have 4 people sitting in the firehouse, for all intents and purposes, doing nothing, except for the
Car accidents,
once every 2 weeks, is it 50 calls?
No.
Oh, MBAs, you got,
MVAs, we've got smoke investigations, we've got fire alarms, we've got, a full 40% of our calls are fire calls.
okay, so 60% of the 1,500 is, so 900 versus 600. So you've got 2 a day for the fire only guys, 3 a day for the medical only
Yeah.
guys.
I'm saying if you give me this, I can handle that today. And we gotta look at a second station.
Couldn't the folks that are back at the station now do that training piece too? I wouldn't have to hire a training officer.
So we've tried that. I've gone down this road many, many times. The problem is we don't have someone dedicated to go out and learn the new techniques and get the training to bring back to the department. We're doing the best we can right now with training. But this brings it to the level where we're getting quality, consistent training amongst all the shifts, that one training person.
There's gonna be trade-offs to everything.
Sure.
And to me, hiring the staff, which was my other question, by the way, that don't fight fires, I always question that. The administration side of it, that don't do the core part of the business, which is fighting fires.
So I will say every administrative person except the admin assistant is firefighter. They come back and they assist on a fire ground, whether it's in a command function or managing groups. But yes, they do come back and they do fight fires.
And I go back to say, okay, if I'm gonna give you more people, I'm gonna set up an EMS, I'm gonna give you more people for the firehouse. Let them do the training as part of it. I mean, how often do they go to seminars? And how much more training do they need per year? I don't know this. I just.
So it's the quality of, it's mainly the quality of training.
I don't know what that means.
So
Define that. Define how the quality this year gets better next year.
I've
If I
got,
have a dedicated training officer.
I've got one training officer that worked with fire command staff to determine how we operate, right? And we say, here's our standard operation. This person's giving that same training consistently to every member of the department. That's quality. That's a higher quality than we're doing today.
And the state did just enact a much higher bar for the amount of documented training on an annual basis that just went into effect in October, I think, of this year. So there is.
The training and qualifications to be a training,
To be
fire
able to
service training instructor.
to be able to properly
Or higher.
administer and document that training, right, is now raised to, they've, for a long time for medical, we have to accrue a set number or minimum number of continuing education credits in a period, and they've now implemented a similar system for the fire department. In the past, the fire department, you just had to have so many hours, and they let you kind of, they were pretty broad in how you, what you trained on in order to accomplish that. Now they've gotten very specific and raised that bar.
The other was the fire inspector. Well, I give you more personnel. That person can become a fire inspector, and he'll have a car. If there's a fire, he leaves his inspection and goes to the fire.
So the training and certification that go with that take a lot of time as well.
Well, it would whether I have a dedicated fire inspector or I have a fireman.
Correct. And a lot of the knowledge comes from institutional knowledge as you go out and do the inspections time and time again. I can tell you from experience, I worked in a system that did that, and it was a complete and utter failure.
We've tried that. Have we had a fire inspector? No, that was a fire marshal. No, go ahead.
Previously, yeah, the place I used to work at, we worked on implementing a system like that. The personnel doing the fire inspections had to focus on response, and the inspection piece essentially went away.
See, what I'm hearing is creep, cost creep. I'm used to every year, I've got a 7% cost reduction target. And I had to find ways to reduce cost in my plan every year. And all I'm hearing is the reasons why I gotta ask the public for more money. I don't think it's fair.
Well, with 5 calls a day, which is what we're averaging, 5 calls a day,
Ballpark.
the fire inspector, if he or she were being out on those calls, wouldn't get much inspecting done. And same with training officers. Do training officers and fire inspectors go out on calls if they're in the house?
On major calls, yeah.
So,
So as an example, I'll use me as an example, and Doug's out. He's at Lowe's walking through the building. I'm in the office here working on something. I hear a medical call go out. Go back to what I was doing. I hear a car accident go out. I listen to the details. If it's a significant accident, yes, both Doug and I will go. If it happens to be in front of Lowe's, Doug will be there before our engine gets there. Fires, obviously, we both drop what we're doing and leave.
So you're agreeing with what I said then? You can hire a fire inspector and a training person, and they can be part of the 2 in, 2 out.
When they're on duty, it covers 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was getting.
Yeah, it's the other 128.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the evening times. It's when
Right.
Doug and I are at home.
Well, but then you still need to hire the 2 and the 2. I'm giving you 2 in and 2 out. I'm not arguing.
I'm missing something.
I'm confused about it.
Well, the fire inspector and the other staff can be part of responding to a fire. You said they will do that.
Yeah.
So now I've satisfied when they're on duty, the 2 in and 2 out requirement. So I don't need to hire 2 more fire people when they're working.
I believe Bob's thought is they could work into the shift schedule. If the shift schedules could somehow align with I would imagine, at least in your mind, the fire inspector would probably work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, which
Yeah.
would not align with a 24-hour firefighter shift schedule,
Yeah, correct.
unfortunately, I'm just thinking about it from like his viewpoint and then your viewpoint. And I agree with where you're going with it. If we can solve it with that body that exists and they do their job and
So I'd say during the daytime, when both Doug and I are working, and I've got 4 guys on duty, that we respond to a structure fire, Doug and I are the incident commanders, and those 4 firefighters are all working. We lose that in the evening when Doug and I go home.
But yeah, Bob, all of us, I think, are missing something here in the ability for someone, I think Bob has the assumption, and maybe it's correct or not, I don't know. Bob has the assumption that someone can get trained wherever they go to get training, to become a training officer. And they presumably have to go certainly annually, perhaps semi-annually, I don't know. And I don't know if you go away or if you do this online, but they have to be trained. And then they hold classes.
Yeah, then they provide the instruction in-house.
Okay, and that instruction in-house is done during prime time, 9 to 5.
Yep, well, generally during the daytime, yeah.
And of course, it's interrupted when there's a fire or a medical.
Yes.
So when that training officer is training him or herself, are they in the house or are they in Lansing or are they in
Yeah,
Chicago? or-
depends. It's generally within the state somewhere.
Okay, so they may be
Firefighters-
off-site.
Yes, they absolutely are. Fire instructors conferences are held at least semi-annually.
So if that was one of your 2 in and 2 out guys, you'd be short for that week or 3 days that that person's gone.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the piece we're missing there.
Then you can call on people on overtime.
Well, okay, but, well, I think we're only talking about one body here, so not 3. You have 1 training officer, not 3.
You have the
Fire
inspector too.
Can the training officer be the fire inspector?
There's.
in
No,
theory,
no, I'm
Doug
saying,
doesn't have
take
enough
the
time to do the
inspector,
fire
but let
inspection.
that person also be a firefighter.
He is.
Give me a hand here. No, I agree. I agree with you.
To your point, one
Didn't
of
you
the
have
things
Task
I think,
reductions at NASCO?
Oh, yeah.
So
Why is it we don't require that for
Cross-training,
public service?
Doug is our fire
cross-training
inspector.
And staff reductions is
but
8
how much of your
years in a row.
day is dedicated to fire
Okay,
inspection
my
versus
whole career,
other
why don't we have that
duties
for
and activities?
public service?
I mean, it's.
Roughly
va-
half
it-
or
it-
a
it's-
third
It's variable, but,
over time?
Majority, I'd say.
yeah,
Okay,
Majority of your day is what?
inspection related responsibilities.
okay.
You know, appointments, meetings,
Actual
new
inspections.
project reviews, following up on ongoing construction.
And the only time you interrupt that work is when there's a major fire? Would that be a car accident on 94?
It could be,
Potentially.
yeah,
Okay, but not the everyday quote unquote routine medical.
Right.
Or the trash can fire. Where with the trash can fire, you theoretically don't need 2 in and 2 out. There's nothing inside.
and really, again,
Engine takes care of it.
a big part of what we do when we respond is take over the administrative supervision and management of the scene so that all of our firefighters can go to work, and
Including the
go
battalion chief
inside.
and the lieutenants.
The captain and lieutenants.
Captain.
Once we get to a battalion chief level, Doug and I would, they would be the primary incident commander. Doug and I would supplement them doing their job.
I think we are all, the non-fire people are all struggling with the fact that the same person in our minds should be able to do firefighting and training because they're doing it now. The question or the problem is they're not doing it effectively.
It's a specialty, yes.
And the other, if someone is doing firefighting and another job, if they're on a 24-hour shift, they're only there
Third of the time.
a third of the time. And so again, with the training officer, that's where it's really
Oh.
important that you've got somebody on a 40-hour shift
That's the
So
missing
that,
piece.
so that they're there
Impact.
with impacting and interacting with every single shift, because otherwise it's variable on how the shifts approach any of those tasks, whether it's inspection, whether it's training, anything else you're doing.
That's the missing piece. The training officer who is also an active firefighter can only train his shift or
Right,
her shift.
exactly.
So we would technically then need 3 training officers or one that works 40 hours.
Why is that? You just stagger. So next week you work a different shift.
Our firefighters are assigned to a shift, and the way the overtime plays into it, as well as union rules, probably would not allow that.
The training officer can't go from shift to shift to train?
It'd be a bargain for position, and the union would agree to rules for that.
Lance, comment? I mean, again, you're just giving me obstacles to get to common sense solutions. I don't buy it. Because I've done it.
You've done it in the business world.
What, and that's my question. Why should we look at this any different than how we run a business?
Well, your people don't work a 24-hour shift. When you're staffing
The
your
training
business,
officer is not working a 24-hour shift.
I know, that by design,
So what?
but the firefighters are.
Fine. And I'm saying this week he works first shift. Maybe a month from now, he does the second shift. 2 weeks from now, he does the third shift. And he trains each shift that way.
I think something from your reports to the board helps clarify that you try to do several hundred hours of training each month, correct? And that is across pretty much all the shifts.
Yeah,
I mean, ideally, shifts are training every day.
Yeah,
yeah, we should every single day, we should have.
as long as they're not on an incident.
Just moving along. Okay, sorry, we kind of went down this rabbit hole, but it's a good rabbit hole to go down.
Again, I'd ask that we put this on the agenda so that we can have the chief and prepared to discuss this in greater detail and I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and Bob brings up some valid points. You know, why is it in the public sector, they have different ways of doing things, and in the private sector, you know, our prioritization is to get the job done due to our fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. And how do we get it done the best at the least amount of cost? How, and efficiency optimization is what, you know, in the plant we do. So,
You know, a skeptical person.
and I understand the differences. You know, Bob had a labor agreement. He had multiple labor agreements and multiple labor rules. And I suspect that, you know, we got to respect and honor it because it's a contract. So I think we just need to take a deeper dive into it, but give, you know, the chief a week to,
Yeah, let me know what,
yeah.
email me questions you want answered.
Okay.
You want to talk about your?
Are we done with old business? There was no old business.
No business.
All right, may I share?
May I share, please, Terry?
You're, you should be able to.
Okay. As we, let's see. There, all right. As we talked last week, you know, let's start building a dialogue around, you know, not just the capital budget, but also the millage and how we're going to fund this. And using Andy's sheet as a baseline, where to start. And then kind of marrying this sheet in with the existing budget. The fire department was a Department 600 or whatever it is in your chart of accounts. And let's start there for the details of your line items and how you administer your business. And I look back, not just the current year, well, actually the 2023 budget, but also the 2022. So I could look back 2 years to see what are the capital and operating requirements, year over year. And using that detail, breaking these assumptions down into all the line items in the budget for a smell test. Does this reflect a pattern consistent with 22 and 23 budgets? So that's the basis now of what you're going to see. The other thing is assumptions. In my professional career, you had to make assumptions on not just a 1 or a 2 or a 3 year operating budget, but also a 5, a 10, and a 15-year capital budget. So I made some assumptions, so I'll go into that. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll just pick one template because they're all the same. It's just different assumptions to get you different millage results, okay? And I'm just going to do this on a high level because you guys can go home and put it on your big screen on your computer and you guys could, tear it apart. But one thing that I would ask when you do go home, look at those assumptions, and tell me that Perry, let's make this a different number. And that's fine, because that's why this template is designed, is to move numbers around as we think. So, Bob had a good point today, prioritizing our capital spend and our operating spend. So this template will give you that flexibility by plugging the numbers in, whether it be option 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay. So having said that,
Before you start, is each template standalone?
yes,
Is option 3,
yes,
it's really, it's not option, well, it is option 3, it's not step 3, it's option 3. And it takes us to where we are today to here, all the
Right.
capital.
I'm glad you brought that up. You'll see in not just the capital, but in the operating. Or option 1 has its own set of assumptions. But option 2 includes option 1, but it has that step up level increment based on, the number of bodies, the number of vehicles and things like that, and bricks and mortar. So 1 stands on its own, 2 stands on its own, but it also incorporates whatever option 1 rollovers are into 2, and then 2 into 3, or 1, 2 into 3, 1, 2, 3 into 4.
So if we pick 3, we're really picking 1 and 2.
By these numbers here, so 1 numbers are automatically in 2 because you've done it. 2 is in 3 because you've done 1 and 2.
Okay.
And that's where Bob's question is that, hey, you had startup capital in 2 of 70,000 for Zeeb and 2.7 million for Wagner, but you don't have the same in option 3.
So you filled that hole, so to speak. You
Yes.
accounted for that.
Yeah, it's baked in the number. So let's, I don't want to, I'm just going to go with option 4 because clearly that's the Cadillac that we want to get to, 5 or 10 years down the road. That's the goal. So let me start there because this one is, has the most robust set of numbers in it. Now this is opening up, I hope. All right.
Probably gonna stop sharing and reshare the document you just opened. Oh, probably.
Oh, yeah. You're right. And go back into share. And
Should have your PDF.
there it is. All right. I start with this. This is really nothing more than a line graph that pulls all the numbers together in option 4 at 5.25 mils. And I'm not going to spend much time on it, but there are roughly 24 of these models, because in order to get to a millage rate that is close to a net operating income of break even, in order to establish the highest amount of millage rate that you need to break even on a year-over-year basis. So that's how it started. All right, so you can see in the 5 point, is this 5.25? Yeah, in the 5.25. Yeah, that's a typo. I've got to fix that. The revenue forecast is on an upward trend. And even though the millage rate is fixed at 5.25, you have a tax base that grows. And the assumption that I used on taxable value year-over-year growth is 2%. A conservative, but it's more reflective of the annual growth that we've recognized under Proposal A since 1996. It's about 2%, maybe 2.5. You know, this past year at hitting the ceiling at 5%, that's the first time in the nearly 30 years. All right, your payroll and operating, that assumes, again, a 2% CPI. Now, I haven't looked at the fire department's labor agreement, so I don't know what's baked into the agreement. Is it 2%, 3%, whatever the number is? So, you know, we can plug those, you know, the correct numbers that you want to see. But I just to build the template, I just put 2%. All right. So you can see it's on a, it's not a flat line, but it's on a gradual incline, somewhere between about 7 million and 8 million over a 10-year period of time. And then, of course, the next one down is your net operating income. And what that is your millage revenue less your operating expense gives you NOI. All right. The next one down is your bond debt service, your P&I, and that's a flat line. And baked into this model, option 4, it's both the Zeep Firehouse, the Wagner Firehouse, as well as debt retirement of the 1.5. I'm assuming that's the right loan, intercompany loan is 1.5 million, but we can, again, it's a template. We can refine the number, whatever the payoff is. All right. And then, of course, your accumulated reserve. Right. The accumulated reserve, again, is generated by this 1.25 mils. And when we discussed last week and then earlier at the top of our meeting is that a millage rate is a not to exceed. But you can go down each and every year. The Board of Trustees can say, you know, it's not going to be 1.25 because the growth, you know, we're going to have 4 or 4.5 so that it smooths out the accumulated reserve. And I don't know what the township's policy is on maintaining a reserve minimum or maximum, but we would look to that policy each year to see what is the optimal amount. Should we gauge the millage rate so that it generates no more than up to 2 million or 3 million, whatever the reserve is that you guys are comfortable with, you know, with operating your business. So, but you need 5.25 under the assumptions at least to be about break even at the first year.
Before you leave that slide, I can't see, what is the yellow line?
The
What is
yellow line is your bond, your debt service.
What's the number on the left? Is that 1,750,000 a year? What is it?
We'll get to that, but it's
Okay.
about, I think it's 1.6 million per year to retire both the capital bond and the existing loan. You know, but you'll see.
And we can adjust the rate so that the reserve fund goes up and then starts to level off so that we.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Good.
That's what the finance department should be recommending to the board of trustees with your departmental oversight. They should be recommending, what is the millage rate year over year that we need to do? And it will, it should go down. It should be below the 5.25. It's just the 5.25 gets you in the black in the first year. All right.
And then just one more question, that bond, what would, you said 10 years that drops off?
Yeah, paid in full after 10 years. Both the Zeeb Wagner operating capital as well as the existing debt service.
And in theory, if we budgeted correctly, we'd have reserves to replace equipment and vehicles.
Correct.
Just not operating.
Yeah.
I cash.
Yeah. All right. Now let me go into this is opening. Hang on.
And then there's the question of, does it make more sense to pay cash for a vehicle or to bond for a vehicle? Do we need $8 million in reserve so we can write a check, or $5 million in reserve so we can write a check, or does it make sense to bond $1.5 million? That's,
And
if we had a finance department, they could tell us.
I will say to your point there, all the apparatus manufacturers have lease-to-own programs, so we can do that with any vehicle.
Okay.
All right. This tab is the capital improvement tab. Taking this worksheet and putting it into a capital plan, looking at and examining all of your related general ledger accounts, and where I didn't know what the GL was, I just put X's there. But when you're doing a capital budget, at least the many that I've done over the past 40 years, these are typically the line items that I look at, where you need to start out with land. We already own the land, and I'll show you an adjustment to back out to $250,000. Units is the square feet of the lot, and this second one is Station 3. We spoke last week of land banking, the importance of land banking, because we know maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to have a third fire station because of our population growth. So let's put that in now, and we can land bank it. We can use that land, not just for, exclusively for a fire department, but in recent years and in today's time, we can use it as a park, or we can use it for whatever it is we want to use it for until the fire department is ready to implement its third station plan. So both lots are in there. Now, one thing that early on, Bob, you gave us a number. The architect had like $6.3 million or something for capital, just to build the firehouse, or to the Wagner place. All right. So I took that 6.3 million dollars because I'm used to looking at detail. And when I approve a budget, you know, particularly if it's a 60 or $100 million budget, I want to see details. So these are typical construction components of a capital build. You have the land improvements, and these are the typical categories under the real property improvements. And the dollar amounts here are based on my experience over the past, well, post-COVID and what it's going to cost. So for to do the building, it's about $4 million. And this has to be refined because there's no way in heck that a 6,000 square foot building is going to cost $676 a square foot to build. So that's what I said earlier, the 6.3, there's something in there that I need more detail in order to make some adjustments here to get these numbers worked out. The equipment, one thing that I noticed in this capital or the detail that I did have, there's nothing in that detail that goes to furnishings, technology, communications, nothing to furnish the building. The 6.3 was, here's an empty building, you know, nice house, but nobody home because there's nowhere to sit, you know. No furniture for dorms or.
I think that 6.3, their estimate included all in.
It is?
Yeah, I believe that included everything.
Okay, so we can refine these numbers. This is your capital outlay for vehicles. This miscellaneous, there's your 127, your 50 and your 210. And then the other thing that I noticed is that whenever you're doing a bond or whenever you're doing any kind of financing, you're going to have professional fees that the architect didn't build in or the engineers didn't build into their numbers. And it's been my experience that when my guys built plans, it was they get the architect's estimate, and all of a sudden that estimate now becomes the budget, and that's the number that's presented to the C-suite, and it's exclusive of or not inclusive of all the fees, because the architect just puts the fees in that he or she contract is responsible for. So when I add these X's in the GL, these are things that I know are outside of the architect's estimate, based on my experience. So
this is sort of your contingency built in because there wasn't, obviously, I know, to your point, I think $600 a square foot is ridiculous for construction costs, but there's no contingency built into the construction line item. And of course, there is going to be cost escalators, especially since it's going to be realistically 2 or 3 years before construction can actually start based on timeline.
oh yeah. So the next component, or so the all-in for 4, as I, you know, again, this is a template that we can refine to put the, you know, the numbers that we agree on. Okay, so those line items are there. The next section is if we're going to use equity, if we're going to use our own cash as a deposit, as to buy down the note, whatever it is. So these, the first one is land purchase funding. You already own the land, but you have the 250 on top as a capital request. This is where you back it out, because you want to be transparent to the public. You want to say, we have this firehouse project, we're having this fire department generational upgrade to where we need to be based on the size and our growing community. So we just want to make sure that we put all the line items in there, and then we can back those numbers out below here. So this is the 250. You already own it, so that this 250 zeroes out the land up above. All right. Our very first meeting, we talked about ARPA.
Talk about what?
ARPA.
Yeah.
We have ARPA funds. So I just put a number in there, 1.6. I think I was talking to Jessica and she said she had some money, or the board had some money. And I just put the 1.6. Again, the line is a placeholder. It could be 0 when we're done, or it could be 2 million, or it could be $500,000. In other words, the line is there. So this current example, or this example for option 4 assumes 1.6 in ARPA. And then I also put a line item in there for loan from the general fund. I know we don't do that, or we shouldn't be doing that, but because that's for rainy day, it's not for capital investment. So, but I did put a line item in there and then other identifiable or unidentified sources. So the template has the lines for the adjustments. They could be 0 or they could be a number. So based on these assumptions, particularly the equity piece of it, total bond for just the capital would be $8.8 million. Okay. Now, this next section, when you go to float a bond, you not only want your capital, but also you're going to have a bond interest expense. So you want to include that calculated bond interest expense, and that be part of the total amount of the bond, so that the interest is paid off using the 5.25 mils. Okay, so that's what. Oh, by the way, this 8.8 million in capital, if you had to say, okay, Mark, what would that millage rate equate to? And it's about 54 cents. And your annual P&I would be just for the building, the bricks and the mortar and the capital equipment would be about 890,000, just for the capital piece. All right. Now, you add in the interest, and it's about 66 cents millage when you're adding the interest. Now here again, we were requested to insert into the model an assumption that we'll roll our debt, our 1.5, into whatever the 5.25 mils or whatever the mill is. And this is where that comes in. All right. You have the total interest of 1.9 for the capital. You have 322,000 of interest for the loan, and the total capital interest for both financing is about 2.2, and your total expenditure, the total bond has got to be about 12.6, or just for the capital, it's going to be about 77 cents, 80 cents in millage. All right. And then what does that mean in total millage revenue? It's going to generate about 1.7, call it 1.8 million each and every year for a 10-year period. Now, that sounds rich, and it is rich. But again, I started with the option 4 so that we could see all in, what the template looks like, the flexibility of the template, and how we can adjust these numbers. So whatever we do with capital and operating expenses, the annual revenue needed to pay down on the bond over a 10-year period, that will fluctuate. All right, now this next section here is the revenue forecast. And this is nothing more than a wild ass guess. I will be the first one to mention it, because you can see just on the taxable value inflationary, I use 5%, the maximum for 2024, because I didn't know if our inflation will come down or stay, but I just capped it out at 5. We can change it down to 2%, or pardon me?
Because that's what it was this year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, and then I also put in, when I created this template, it was uncertain whether or not we had Headley rollback, but a PA 33 is accepted from Headley. And it's a special assessment, SAD. So it's not subject to Headley. However, if we do have some scenarios where we would look at funding that's subject to Headley, yeah, it's already built in here, and all we got to do is put a rollback adjustment factor. So up here on the top, this column here is the 2022 actual to date. We had about 1.48 billion in tax base, in real property tax base. You cannot levy on nothing but real property. You can't levy on personal, just real property. So I assumed, again, a 5% growth rate. So that takes you for real property only of 1,000,055 or 1,000,000,055, call it 1.6 billion. All right, for 2023. All right, but what we're doing is that's just to get you to 2023, the election year, but we're not going to start levying, assuming the voters approve the levy, until 2024. So that's why you see we start with a 5.5, and in year one, it's 1.6 billion. I started out with, the 2022 tax base, but I adjusted it to be 2024 in the expectation of 1.6 billion. No Headley rollback factor. Now, this next section, the next 3 columns, again, going back to full transparency, there are currently 2 components of the fire millage that I'm aware of. In 2018, we approved 90 cents. And then we approved 45 cents for a total of 1.35.
And I know that's how you're explaining it, but the way I understood it was we were extinguishing the 9.5.
Oh,
The
yeah,
1.35.
yeah, exactly.
It's 2 different ways of looking at it, but it's exactly the same number.
Right. The reason I put it here is that I think it's important for us here to understand where we started with our millage rate of of 90 cents, and then we approved another 45 in 2020. And in order to get to the 5.25 mils, we need to increase 1.35 by 3.9 mils to get to. So you can see where these millage buckets have gone over the past few years. All right, so, and this is the revenue from each one of those buckets, with a total revenue of 5.25 in column 6. And then as a proof, what you do is you just divide total revenue by total taxable value. So it proves out that this is a 5.25 millage rate. And there's some footnotes. I won't bore you with that stuff. You can read it on your own. All right, now this section.
Which tab is that?
Pardon me?
Which tab is that?
Oh, this is the P&L tab. Should be like the 4th one to the right.
Okay.
All right. This is on the operating side. The revenue section is nothing more than what we just looked at, but we put it at the top of the P&L. Now, expenditures. All right. This spreadsheet is contained in this section right here. All right, where you see response, administrative, and prevention, with a total of their full time. Now, one thing that I need to point out is I said earlier, I went to the budget to look at all the line items. You don't see, there's another tab that, and you can see it on yours, that's the data input tab. That's where all the data is inputted. I didn't create a PDF of that file because you guys can look at that on your own, but that's where we would make our adjustments. And all of the line items are rolled up into this line here, subtotal full-time employees and employee benefits. So this $700,000 is already in the ZEB and the Wagner. So all these benefits are already rolled up into the 2 million and the 4 million and the or the overall 6 million. They're already rolled in there. All right. So once I've created, a total for each of the incremental increases in the expenses and payroll as well as operating expenses, I just took this cost times the index factor of for growth in wages. I assumed 3% the first 2 years and then 2% each year thereafter. Inflationary rate for operating expenses because they function separately from labor. And then inflationary for capital. So that's how I built the 10-year forecast on payroll. It just took what we started with here and projected it out 10 years. Right. The down here is there's some line items in the budget that they're there, but I didn't use them because they're either a de minimis number or it's assumed they're already in these expenditures, but currently they're at zero anyway, or $2,000 or $3,000. So it's not a material number that's going to affect the analysis in any way. So coming right down to the bottom line, in the first year in 2024, it shows a net operating income about 1.4 million. And I can't read that millage rate, but it, let me see, we do fit visible, no. Let me go to 100%, maybe that's better. It's about 0.86 mils, about that. All right, but we have debt. So this is NOI before debt service. The next page is we add in our capital debt service and then our payoff debt service for a total debt service of 1.2 million. And then your after-tax NOI or after debt service is about 136,000, and it's going to generate year over year between 300,000 and 600,000, and it's just going to accrue until you get up to about 15 million. And again, each and every year, the Board of Trustees has to approve the levy, and what they would do is approve a levy that manifolds or modifies or controls the accumulated revenue fund balance. So I'd encourage you. I did not put the data input page on there because it's really busy and there's a lot. I'll just leave it up to you guys to go to the spreadsheet and you can look at it and we can modify these numbers. We can modify them because this is it's a flexible living and breathing document that we can refine as we go along and as we prioritize our spend or our investment, whatever way you want to look at it. So that's what, in my email last night, I believe I said the first and second year break even on NOI was about 1.75 mils, I think. And then option two, I can't remember what option two was in the email. I don't have it with me, but I think it was like 2.75 or or maybe it was 3.25. I can't remember. And then of course, the all-in for was like 5.25.
Option 2 was 325.
3.25. Okay.
And then,
So for each option, there's 4, 5, or 6 of these templates based on changes in assumption. So I had to create that many in order to bracket to get to the 5.25. I had to create that many to get to the 1.75 and the 3.25. So, I'll be happy to lay it all out there. You guys can look at all of these, but there's about 2 dozen of these options where you can see how, it's refined, it's refined, it's refined, it's refined. And it's all in the variables, it's all in the assumptions. So anyway, that's my story.
I think it's very impressive. Would you like to be the finance director?
No.
I mean, it's very extremely detailed. I only had about 30 minutes this morning to look at before the meeting, but.
Well, in my corporate life, when I had to go to the C-suite, these guys are all finance people. We have very few marketing. We have, very few, mostly finance. And that's the level of detail that they want to see. Because the CEO has to sign a Sarbanes-Oxley management agreement and it says, I looked at everything. And I agree with it. So that's the story behind that. So anyway, it's a lot to digest right now. Take it back to your office. Look at it. And Chief, we really need to refine these assumptions, particularly on the capital side, on the bricks and mortar side. I think the capital side on the equipment is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's the easy part for me.
Yeah.
I generally used what our engineering firm suggested for those data points. I kind of came up with what I thought. We met, we talked, and they kind of fine-tuned those for us. So that was generally what OHM had suggested would be appropriate.
Was that recently?
Yeah, this was 2 months ago.
Okay.
Oh, let me
go back to square foot. I gotta figure out what our building footprint looks like too, so.
on the data input tab, which we didn't look at the top right corner,
Okay.
I have your real property. I have land size, the line for land sizes for all 3, Z, Wagner, Station 3, and then building size. Your building size is in there.
Okay.
But, I tried to, I went to the assessor's website to see if I could find the square footage of the building, and the only thing that was there is the new outbuilding,
Okay.
the new outbuilding. So I just went to Google Maps and did how you can plot. And
Yeah.
Came up with an estimate, yeah.
yeah, so that's the origin of that.
Okay.
So I just
I'll
assumed,
measure it. I'll shoot. I've got a wheel. I'll just wheel it off.
yeah, I just assumed 6,000 square feet for the new firehouse. It's just a wild guess. It's like,
Yeah.
we can fix it to be whatever it is once we get the architect's detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, the biggest thing I look at, you're right, the assumptions are key to everything in this, because there's so many of them and they could change.
Yeah, and and that's something that needs to be understood throughout this whole process. actual cost, at least for the bricks and mortar, is not gonna be known.
For 3 years.
So we're done.
Well, until you go out to bid.
Yeah.
And then when you execute your not to exceed contracts, that's when you're gonna have your true up of, here, well, as we read in Sun Times last night, you know, Board of Trustees had some true up language to, I don't know, some SADs. And it's probably because these variables weren't known at the time, you know. I don't know that, but I'm just guessing because
I'll defer to David on that.
I don't know how many times that these unknowns come up where I've had to go back to C-suite and ask for, you know, another 10 to 15%. It's because, you know, the unknowns, you don't know until you start peeling the onion back.
Similar experience with renovating this building, you know.
This building and that building.
Yeah, my experience relates to the one next door, but you know, there was a measurement that was off by a foot, which cost us $50,000. You know, and it wasn't our measurement, but we get stuck with it.
Oh, yeah. So, anyway, take a look at it. Tell me how to refine it, or you can refine it, because you have both the PDF and the Excel.
I do have a question on, and maybe not germane to this discussion right now. I'll ask you after the meeting.
I guess I have a related question really quick, or related. Is there anyone on our committee that cannot make our meeting on the 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving?
I'll be here.
Me too.
I'm not going to.
I'll be here. I just was thinking about that over the last little bit.
I'll be here.
Okay.
You here? Yeah. Who's on? Bob and
Bob
Mitch?
and Mitch.
We have a clause.
Yep, and we'll have a quorum.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll be able to attend.
Okay.
okay.
As far as I know, I will too.
Is that Mitch?
Yes, oh, that was Bob.
Oh, that was Bob.
Bob, yeah.
Bob and Mitch.
Yeah, we both said it at the same time.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Well, and to your point, we're supposed to have a recommendation by December 1st. The first meeting of the board is, well, I don't know, what is it?
Second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday.
The 13th, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, like,
Well, we certainly have to have it before the 13th, probably at least a week to get it into the,
Yeah,
to get it
13th.
into the packet. But the question is, do we want to have a separate session with the board prior to putting it on the agenda? We talked about having an information on Saturday, you know, a come to Jesus meeting with the board, rather than a Tuesday night that's starting at 7 o'clock, have a Saturday morning where we can do what we just did to the board. But we're kind of running out of time. So I think next week we got it. I don't know if what's next week? Next week will be the 16th. And then the 25th?
23rd.
23rd?
Or the 30th.
Maybe it's the first Saturday of December that we talk about, we're talking about educating the board before we put it to a Tuesday night board meeting.
Okay.
Having that Saturday informational discussion with the board.
Yeah.
Assuming that the board members are available. But I think if we're going to schedule that, we should probably ask them today to have the supervisor or the clerk check with the board members to see if they're available, what Saturday they will be available, and if they even want to do it. I would be afraid to put this on a Tuesday night without some education. I think it'd take too long.
Well, I think they'll have questions for us, so we may have to go back
Yeah,
before we go to the Tuesday night.
yeah. So we need to have that question answered before Tuesday night, right?
And what was your proposed date? I apologize.
What's the first Saturday of December?
December 3rd.
December 3rd. That's a small problem for me. It's my wife's birthday and I'll be in Las Vegas with her.
Ooh, well, you can zoom in. Just kidding. Okay, well, all right. That would be an issue. Okay.
Their meeting is the 15th. I'm sorry.
We'll save you losing money.
I don't gamble. I go there for the entertainment.
There you go.
I think let me check their schedule. I think they've got one meeting. Might be, it's the 13th, okay.
So we could do it on the 10th, for example. That would be the following Saturday, the Saturday before their only meeting in December.
Saturday.
Well,
I guess that's the other question. It doesn't necessarily have to be.
well, let's see, who works? Well, other than the three executives, they work here full time, but I don't know, we'd have to find out when they can, we need at least a 3 hour chunk of time. I mean, we've been at it now for 2.5.
Uh-huh.
I only live 2 miles down the road. I can be I'll be flexible with my schedule, just.
Well, I think it really depends on the board, because I'm a 10-minute walk from right there.
Why don't we ask the board when they want to?
Yeah. I'll approach them today. I'm assuming they'll want it. I'm hoping they want it.
I would hope so, yeah, I agree.
All right, what do we do for next week? What do we need to do for next week?
What do you need from me for next week?
Well, we'd like to prioritization of service, right? Discussion. That we spent an hour on.
And what do you need from me for that?
Well, first of all, is it doable? With and
Okay,
if it's doable, what does it take to do?
gotcha.
To staff rescue 24/7 and fire 24/7, where those people are separate.
Gotcha.
Essentially, what you're doing, I believe, is you've got option one with your assumptions there, and option two for the 2 firehouses with assumptions, both personnel and equipment.
Yeah, something in the middle,
And
gotcha.
and isolate the EMS piece that's in 2 or in 1 and 2. Just, and isolate that.
How can we satisfy the EMS piece? What would we do? And what would that do to us on the fire piece? I call it a 1A.
Yeah, no, I gotcha.
I'm just, without data, I'm thinking it's gonna help you on the fire side. And we're gonna respond to the community better on the medical side.
Gotcha.
Without cannibalizing fire.
Oh, I don't want to cannibalize fire.
Right.
Gotcha.
Like I said, I'm all with the 2 in, 2 out. I think we owe the department that, right? But I think we also need to optimize our money that we spend, do the right thing. And the data is telling me with medical is where.
I think it's a prudent business decision.
It doesn't, it kind of means, maybe I'm being wrong, maybe I'm simplifying it, but it kind of means doing option 2 without Wagner.
Yes, I think I'm with you on that. Again, the details I'm not sure, but yeah.
Basically, I mean, physically, in a sense, that's what we're asking. Can we do option 2 without the Wagner building?
For the next 3 to 5 years.
Gotcha.
Let's
Let me do some digging on that and I'll
Okay.
work with you.
See, I think we reconvene, whether it's us or the fire group,
Fire committee.
in like 3 years. And we say, okay, where do we want to go for the next 5 to some odd years?
Yeah, no,
I think it's hard for us to predict 15 years down the road.
Couldn't
We
agree
don't know
more.
what's gonna happen. And there's a turnover in the community,
Oh, yeah.
you know. People move in 7 years on average, right, in the
Yeah, sure.
country. We don't know if we're gonna be alive in 15 years. That's old.
And quite honestly, we could stop building 3 years from now, or we could triple population in 10 years. I don't know. It's just, yeah.
And it would be nice to know our population growth. My gut is that we've been right around 17 for the last couple of years, 17,000 for the last few
But our building permits are out though. New starts.
years. Okay, well, anyway, all right, so,
I have one conflict next week related to Medical Control Authority. I've got up here at the, it's called PSRO, Professional Standards Review Committee. We transported a patient in our non-licensed vehicle, so I have to appear before them. And I don't have a definitive time.
There's a policy that allows it.
No,
It's just, this is closing the loop.
will this happen on a Wednesday? Is that what you're saying?
Save a
yes,
life.
it's sometime Wednesday.
Sometime Wednesday.
We avoided waiting
They
40 minutes
have-
for an ambulance.
They have a second, it's a second part of a meeting. It's a closed meeting. They won't know the official start time until they're getting close to the end of the first meeting.
I'm flexible either side of Wednesday or Wednesday afternoon. I'm flexible.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Be
And
flexible.
it might, big picture, I've got to probably step out for 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh,
So it's not huge.
Oh, so it's a Zoom, you can.
Yes.
Zoom.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all
Yes.
right. Well, then why don't we just stick with the 9:30 and then you can.
When I get my notification, I'll bump out. Okay, that works for me.
All right. And I'll check with the board to see if they can get together sometime after Thanksgiving, but before the 13th.
Public comment.
Yep. All right, so I think that's old business. So public comment. Terry, we have no one in the room. Terry, do we have any hands?
We do, Joe, or Rob Pattinson.
Rob, yes, we remember 1.5 billion.
Fair enough. Let me turn the volume on the screen down. So it feels like you guys have been doing homework for the last month. And today was a turning point. Bob's questions were absolutely critical to getting to the meat of the subject as you've been doing today. I would like to suggest that Bob work with Chief and Mark Perry to structure those questions so that the chief knows where he needs to get the data from, and Mark can help in that process. Because I think you want to work on those questions this week so that when next week's meetings happens, you hit the ground running. Like you were just talking about a few minutes ago, time is running short, and you guys still have quite a bit of ground to cover. Mark, I've got a question for you. Since you are our in-house volunteer finance director.
was I out of the room?
Did you see that in the fine
We'll
print?
give you a very large pay raise.
I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
We've got this $1.5 million mistake. And today you talked about paying that off through the millage. Because the board made the mistake, should it be up to the board to figure out how to fix it rather than the residents fixing their problem by tacking on an additional tax, basically? And so my question is, and it's not to be answered today, but just to noodle on, is there an ethical or a proper way that mistake needs to be fixed by the board rather than tacking it on to the millage?
I'll noodle on that.
It's almost like a bookkeeping issue. But go ahead, Rob.
It seems really unfair to tack that on to the fire department when it was the township's mistake. And what we're asking residents to do is pay for this firefighting protection, not to fix a financial goof by the previous board. So there's just some ethical aspects to this that make it really uncomfortable.
Non-committal, I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm not suggesting that we do this at all. You have three components of this. We have the capital and operating side of the capital request. And then you have debt service 1, which is the debt service on the capital and operating. And then you have debt service 2, which is the 1.5, the intercompany loan. Possibly what you do is split off the bond piece of it and have a specific dedicated bond millage isolated from the millage necessary for O&M. And you'd have two ballot questions. You would have a fire department O&M question, which I don't know what that millage is. It's 1.35 now, so it's probably going to be about 1.9. And then you have one bond bond initiative millage request at whatever that number is gonna be, you know, is it 2 or 3 mills or whatever it is? And you just isolate the two. So Rob, I'm thinking, you know, there is a way to split the 1.5 debt out of fire department's budget by possibly doing an isolated millage rate just on the 1.5 or including the capital piece of it. I mean, that might be a way, I don't know, but, you know, in the end, while it may be unfair to the fire department, the money was spent, and whether rightly or wrongly, and in the end, it's only the taxpayers that are responsible for it. Because government doesn't take responsibility unless it's got an insurance policy to pay off malfeasance and misfeasance. I would think, but I don't know. I have no history on the 1.5. I have zero history, so I just don't know.
That brings up another question. We know that a post project SAD is illegal, SAD. And does the renovation project happened a few years ago, and it's only now, if it goes to, say it goes to this bond millage as you were talking about, then that's kind of a post-project millage. Is that legal?
I don't know the answer to that
Good.
question.
All good questions. You got that down there?
You know, refinancing municipal debt is not uncommon. And could it be considered a refinancing of existing municipal debt for, you know, lower interest rate or better terms or whatever?
It's zero now.
Zero interest?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's. the
Long- or
answer.
longer.
With a 20-year term, so.
So, Rob, there's just too many unknowns for me to.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for the back and forth. I really appreciate you guys. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right, thanks, Rob. Jerry?
Well, just to know that Mitch had to leave.
Okay.
And next up is Pam. Pam Boyd, you can go ahead.
Thank you. And Terry, were you going to read Jillian's questions?
I was gonna bring that up.
I'm sorry, what?
I was gonna bring that up right after your comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mark, can you be the manager for the township SADs? Oh my gosh, it was a lot over my head, but just the fact that you were pulling all of these different lines out, that was so missing in the SAD special board meeting. I digress. Chief, could you open up some days for the committee to ride with the guys to get a better feel of the day-to-day going on at the fire department?
Yeah, I can answer that quickly if you don't mind the interruption, but any member of this committee is welcome to come ride with the fire department any day. You have an open invitation.
Put the nitroglycerin under your tongue before you get in the truck. The adrenaline rush is huge.
For 5 years, I drove a tanker, a tractor trailer, my dad's oil company. And you want to talk about, you're like white knuckling and you're 12,000, 20,000 gallons down the freeway. And hope some knucklehead
Doesn't cut you off.
doesn't cut me off.
Anything else, Pam?
Yeah, yes. So there's several nuances to the proposal, and this is for the board presentation as well, is when you're giving your presentation, doing a keep it simple, stupid mindset, try to boil it down to something that is like, there's an old marketing story where a couple are looking at buying a house, and the wife is saying, "Oh, I want the upgrade," and the seller of the house is trying to help with that, and he essentially boils it down to what it would cost the homeowners to buy this house with the upgrade, down to a cup of coffee a day, to make it more realistic in day-to-day terms. So when we're looking at the here, I've got this written down, spelling out future improvements to our fire station and how it benefits the public. After a millage vote, keep the edge and keep the education ongoing. It's like you guys are gonna be presenting education that really should have been going on for years to help educate residents about the needs of the fire department. But trying to keep things into perspective as to, okay, this millage is gonna cost this much. And that is like a cup of coffee, and who knows, nowadays it still might be a cup of coffee. I don't go to Starbucks. So I'll boil that down to those are my comments. Thank you you guys are great.
Thank you, Pam. Jillian had a question?
Jillian had to leave the meeting, but she submitted some comments and questions in the chat. She says, I apologize if the questions I have already been answered. Is there a way to create a plan based on the options to create a plan for population growth over 2, 5, 7, and 10 years? And what are the laws, if any, requiring different types of equipment needed on scene based by calls? She says, a few years ago, I read an article about a car accident in Northfield Township on 23. The township billed the emergency service to those in the accident. Does Scio have a fee schedule for types of calls above and beyond residents and their guests? For example, during the summer, visitors are attracted to the Huron River. Sometimes when they are partying, they do stupid things which create an emergency. Does Scio charge them? I'm thinking fees for irresponsible acts creating an emergency, not normal medical, etc. And then finally, she says, thank you to each committee member and Chief Hood and Armstrong for your commitment to the safety of Scio.
Can you repeat her first question, please, about population growth? I'm a little confusing to me.
Maybe an incomplete that kind of
Okay.
trails up. Is there a way to create a plan based on the options to create a plan for population growth over 2, 5, 7, and 10 years? And then she says, for example, but that's ordinance.
We haven't taken into, okay, all right. We've only taken into fiscal growth. We haven't taken into population growth, but presumably one and the same. Perhaps
Well,
not necessarily.
average household nowadays is what?
3.5.
2.5.
Ballpark 3 people, I think.
Yeah, so you
2,
take
7, 2, 8 on
your
census.
new housing starts times whatever, times 3 or 4, or whatever the multiple is. I mean, that's the best guesstimate. I don't, maybe the planning department can do that.
I guess the answer to Jillian's question is we'll try.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
I'll just read Mitch's comment when you have the meeting. He said, great meeting, very important discussions, especially with respect to the possibility of a separate rescue squad that Bob raised.
Mhm.
Sorry, I have to leave to attend another meeting.
That was Mitch?
Yes,
Okay,
that's it.
all right, that's it. Okay, anything else, team? All right, we stand adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.